Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Hey, welcome back to Battles of the American Civil War, Beyond the Battles, and we finally made it. Well, not finally made it. We had to make it to old William Tecumseh Sherman.
Oh,
I've been putting this guy
Fire
off.
Marshal himself, huh?
Right. I've been putting this guy off for a while because it's going to be, it might be a one-parter, but it's still going to be like 2 hours long. So it's going to be a long one. Everybody obviously knows he was a general. Scorcher tactics during the war. Came out of the war, became general of the army. We'll take a look at all that. He was born on February 8th, 1820 in Lancaster, Ohio, into a large and ambitious family.
Weren't they all?
He was the sixth of 11 children, born to Charles Robert Sherman, who was a respected lawyer and an Ohio Supreme Court justice.
Oh, shit.
And then you had old Mommy Mary. She was a homemaker.
Mm-hmm.
It's a household that was expected its sons to go somewhere in life, and many of them did.
Fantastic.
One of his brothers, John, he would go on to become a powerful United States Senator and Secretary of Treasury.
Wow.
Another, Charles, he became a federal judge. And yet another, Hoyt, he made his name in banking. But that path was almost cut short early. So on June 24th, 1829, Charles Robert Sherman died suddenly at 40 years old while traveling on court business in Lebanon.
Oh, no.
Overnight, the family lost its provider, and Mary, she was left trying to support 11 kids with limited means. It's kind of event that quietly reshapes a life before a child even understands what's happening. He was only 9 years old.
Especially in 1829. Damn.
Right.
Wonder what happened.
Died of a heart attack, clearly.
That's what it said?
Died suddenly, I would assume it would have been a heart attack, right?
Or an arrow through the chest.
In fucking Lebanon, Ohio.
Ohio? Fuck yeah. Oh, major Indians.
Oh.
9 years old, young William. He was taken to a household of Thomas Ewing, Sr., neighbor and attorney, a prominent Whig politician, and a close family friend who had practiced law alongside Sherman's daddy. Ewing, he did more than offer help. He effectively adopted the boy, raised him as his own, opened doors that would otherwise have been permanently closed. Well, if his dad was alive, the same doors would have been open, maybe more. It was Thomas Ewing who ensured that old William received a solid education. It was also Ewing who secured his appointment to the United States Military Academy at West Point. That single intervention set Sherman on the path that would eventually carry him from an orphaned Ohio boy to one of the most consequential and controversial generals of the American Civil War, or any war, really.
Right.
And like much of Sherman's life, it started not with ambition, but with circumstance, stepping in and refusing to let go. He's like, no, I'm going to hold on.
You have no choice.
Right.
Well, he didn't grow up in the shadow of small ambitions. Like we said, his family tree, they did everything. In addition to his younger brother, John, doing what he did, he also became one of the founders of the Republican Party itself and built a long public life as United States representative, senator, and cabinet secretary. But even in his adopted household, the pattern continued for old Sherman. Two of Sherman's foster brothers, they rose to prominence during the Civil War as well.
Nice.
Hugh Ewing served as Major General in the Union Army before later becoming a diplomat and author.
We know that one.
Thomas Ewing Jr. also wore general stars and later took on a very different kind of battlefield as he served as a defense attorney in the military trials of those accused in the Lincoln assassination.
Son of a bitch.
Wow. Look at that. Wow.
The next generation kept pushing boundaries as well. Sherman's niece, Euthanasia Sherman Meade.
Damn. Didn't know what that word meant back then, I guess.
Euthanasia Sherman Meade. Oh, wow. Became a pioneering woman physician in California at a time when the profession was still largely closed to women. You couldn't be a physician back then. Taken together, it meant that Sherman grew up surrounded by examples of public service, ambition, and responsibility. Soldiers, judges, politicians, bankers, and reformers filled his whole world. Long before Sherman ever marched an army across Georgia and burned everything in his sights, he was already part of a family that expected history to take notice. Sherman's name alone, it was enough to make people stop and ask questions. And it did just that.
Well, William Tecumseh Sherman, he carried a name that sounded nothing like the usual roll call of the 19th century America.
No.
One writer of the era even remarked that Sherman appeared to be the only prominent American named after a Native American chief.
Oh.
According to old Sherman himself, the explanation was simple. In his memoirs, he said his father had caught a liking for the famous Shawnee leader Tecumseh and decided to give his son that name, pairing it with William at birth. Not everyone agreed on how that story played out, though. How the fuck are you going to tell him how his story played out?
That's not how it happened.
Right.
All right.
According to biographer Lloyd Lewis in 1932, he stirred things up by claiming Sherman had originally been named only Tecumseh. Lewis wrote that the name William came later when Sherman was about 9 or 10. Oh, did Ewing give him the name William? And he was baptized as a Catholic at the request of his foster family, the Ewings. And Lewis is telling the Dominican priests performing the baptism found the name Tecumseh too pagan and chose William instead.
Wow.
Supposedly because it matched the saint's feast day on the calendar.
Okay. That's possible.
It makes for a good story and it stuck around for a little while. But more recent biographers, they're not convinced. They point out that Sherman had already been baptized as an infant by a Presbyterian minister.
Yeah.
And the evidence suggests he likely received the name William at that time. So it still was Tecumseh, I guess, right? In other words, the Catholic baptism probably did not rename him at all, despite how often that version of the story has been repeated.
They just love to suck Catholics' asses, don't they?
Right. What's not in doubt is how Sherman referred to himself. As an adult, he signed every letter the same way, even the ones he wrote to his wife, simply W.T. Sherman.
W.T.
Among friends and families, he went by a nickname that fit him far better than either formal name could. That's what they called him. They called him Cump.
Really?
Tecumseh?
Yep.
For Cump.
Hey, yo,
Cump for Tecumseh.
Right.
Which tells me his name was Tecumseh.
Right. Wow. After his daddy died in 1829, Sherman, he was taken into the household of Ewing, as we said before.
Right.
For a boy whose life had been just knocked off balance, the Ewing home brought something rare: stability, structure, opportunity. The path began at the Lancaster Academy in Ohio. This is where Sherman quickly showed he was more than capable in the classroom. He had a sharp mind and a particular knack for subjects that rewarded logic and precision. It was the kind of academic performance that made the next step obvious, especially with the Ewing's political influence right behind him. 1st of July, 1836, 16-year-old William Tecumseh, he entered the United States Military Academy at West Point. Academically, he thrived. Mathematics, engineering, topography became natural. Subject that rewarded careful thinking and spatial awareness rather than blind obedience. Where we heard that before? With Buckner? Blind obedience? These were exactly the skills.
I mean, I guess, yeah.
These were exactly the skills that later defined how we would wage war. Discipline? Well, that was another story. Sherman had a little patience for West Point's rigid system of rules and rituals. He piled up an average of 150 demerits per year.
Hey.
Usually for minor issues involving appearance, polish, or routine compliance. He was not rebellious in any dramatic sense. He just did not care much for pointless formalities.
I don't give a shit what I look like.
Right. Despite this, he remained popular among his classmates, known for his intelligence, his sharp wit, and his ability to see the bigger picture when others were still memorizing regulations.
June 30th, 1840, he graduated 6th out of 42.
That ain't bad.
An impressive finish that earned him a commission as a second lieutenant in the Corps of Topographical Engineers.
Oh.
Was a perfect fit for him. Branch focused on mapping, roads, rivers, and infrastructure, all things that match his analytical strengths. West Point also shaped how Sherman thought about war itself. Under instructors like Dennis Hart Mahan, he absorbed an engineering-based view of warfare that emphasized terrain, logistics, and movement rather than parade ground position. Among his classmates was none other than old George H. Thomas. We did him a while back. He finished 12th and would later become part of Sherman's professional circle. By the time Sherman left, he was already forming the mindset that would define his career. War, to him, was not about pretty formations or perfect uniforms. It was about ground supply lines and understanding how armies actually function when the rules stop mattering. When everything's gone to hell.
Yeah, fuck those uniforms.
When Sherman later looked back on his years at West Point, he didn't dress them up or soften the edges. In his memoirs, he explained his academy experience in plain, almost shrugging terms, the same way he approached most things in life. He said one thing and one thing only about his time in West Point in his memoirs, and it was, "At the academy, I was not considered a good soldier, for at no time I was selected for any office, but remained a private throughout the whole 4 years. Then, as now, neatness in dress and form, with a strict conformity to the rules, were the qualifications required for office, and I suppose I found not to excel in any of these.
Right.
In studies, I always held a respectable reputation with the professors, and generally ranked among the best, especially in drawing, chemistry, math, and natural philosophy.
Right.
My average demerits per annum were about 150, which reduced my final class standing from number 4 to 6. So he could have graduated number 4.
That's bullshit. His academics was better than just because he didn't tuck in his shirt.
Right.
Jeez. The passage, it says almost everything you need to know about W.T. Sherman as a young man. He was not interested in impressing superiors through polish or ritual. No. He cared about substance, about understanding how things worked, about mastering the technical side of soldiering. He accepted the demerits, accepted the consequences, and moved on without an apology. Even then, Sherman understood himself clearly. He was never going to be the model cadet, but he was already becoming something far more dangerous and far more useful in wartime.
Prick.
Yeah. Old Sherman graduated in 1840. He entered the Army as a second lieutenant, 3rd United States Artillery. Quickly sent down to Florida during the Second Seminole War. This was his first exposure to active service. Well, even then, Sherman viewed the conflict with a critical eye. Years later, in his memoirs, he remarked that it was a great pity to remove the Seminoles at all, calling Florida the Indians' paradise, and noting that even decades later, the state still seemed underpopulated and undeveloped.
Yeah, it's a fucking swamp.
It still is now.
Well, half of it, yeah.
After Florida, Sherman was stationed in Georgia and then South Carolina. Charleston. His life took on a very different rhythm. As the foster son of Thomas Ewing, a powerful Whig politician, Lieutenant Sherman moved easily within the upper circles of the Old South society. He was well-liked, socially comfortable, far removed from the hardships usually associated with the frontier soldiering. He liked being on the East Coast.
Unfortunately for him, when the Mexican-American War broke out, he didn't march with an army into battle, though. Instead, he was assigned to administrative duties during the United States occupation of California. By the time he arrived, most of the fighting was already over, though the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo had not been signed until February 1848. Oh, it had not yet been signed when he was there in February of 1848.
Right.
Sherman traveled west with fellow lieutenants Henry Halleck and Edward Ord, departing from New York City aboard the converted sloop USS Lexington. The journey around the Cape Horn, he had to go all the way around South America in those days.
Terrible.
Lasted 198 days, just long enough to forge lasting friendships with these guys.
All right.
Sherman became especially close to Halleck, whose sharp intellect deeply impressed him.
During that very voyage, Sherman and Halleck, they even hiked the summit of Corcovado, overlooking Rio de Janeiro, studying the city's design, a detail that perfectly suited Sherman's engineer-minded way of thinking. January 28, 1847.
I wonder if there's anything there specifically that he was studying of the design. But
Right. Sherman and Ord.
We'll never know.
Right. January 28, 1847, Sherman and Ord disembarked in Monterey. Just 2 days before Yerba Buena officially became San Francisco. Sherman and Halleck lived together in Monterey from 1847 to 49 in what is now known as Sherman Quarters.
Fuck Halleck, I guess, huh?
Right. June 1848, Sherman accompanied California's military governor, Richard Barnes Mason. They went on an inspection trip to the gold mines at Sutter's Fort. Here's a twist of history, folks. Sherman unintentionally helped ignite the California gold rush. He drafted the official reports in which Governor Mason confirmed the discovery of gold.
Look at that.
Oh.
He quickly became involved in the explosive growth of the region. At the request of John Augustus Sutter Jr., he assisted old Captain William Warner in surveying the new city of Sacramento and laid out its street grid in 1848. Look at that. He also opened a general store in Coloma, earning $1,500 in 1849, which is a staggering sum compared to his army pay of just $70 a month.
Right.
Surveying work and land sales in Sacramento and Benicia brought even more money. Despite his success, though, Sherman's military career moved slowly. He received a brevet promotion to captain in 1848 for meritorious service. But his lack of combat experience and steady but unspectacular advances led him discouraged. Right. In the end, Sherman would become one of the very few high-ranking officers in the American Civil War who never fought in Mexico. It's a fact that set him apart from many of the men he would later command. He's like our first guy that didn't. May 1st, 1850, he married his foster sister.
Oh, no.
Ellen Boyle Ewing. What's his foster sister? Ellen, 4 years, 8 months younger than Sherman, and the match firmly tied him to the powerful political family that had raised him. At the time of the wedding, her father, Thomas, was serving as United States Secretary of the Interior. Ceremony took place in Washington and was officiated by James Ryder, which was the president of Georgetown College. Wow.
Oh, that's cool.
Wasn't a quiet affair either. Old President Zachary Taylor, Vice President Millard Fillmore,
Right.
plus a long list of political heavyweights attended.
No shit.
Turned the wedding into a showcase of Washington society at its peak.
Look at that.
Yeah, look at this guy.
Yeah, that's nice. Ellen Sherman was a deeply devout Catholic. religion would be a steady presence in their household. Although William himself was never as religious as his wife, all of their children were raised in the Catholic faith, something that would later become a point of tension between the couple, as Sherman's career kept him away from home for long, long stretches.
Apparently not too long.
Right. Together, William and Ellen had 8 children, a large family even by the standards of that time. Maria Ewing, known as Minnie, born in 1851, died tragically in 1913. Mary Elizabeth, born in 1852, died in 1925. William Tecumseh Jr., known as Old Willie, born in 1854 and died in 1863.
During the war.
Thomas Ewing, born in 1856, died in 1933.
Oh.
Eleanor Mary, known as Ellie, born in 1859, died in 1915. Man, some youngins up in this son of a bitch. Rachel Ewing, born in 1861, died in 1919. Charles Celestine, he was born in and died in 1864. Oh. And Philemon Tecumseh, born in 1867 and died in 1941. So they only had the one at birth, huh?
I mean, the other one was 8. All the other ones lived.
So they lost a baby in 1863.
Had another one and it died.
And it died. Oh, my.
Crazy.
Oh, my.
Where the hell do you find time to father a child in the middle of the war, first of all?
Right.
That marriage placed old Sherman squarely inside one of the most influential political families in the country. It gave him prestige, connections, and expectations. But it also tied him to domestic responsibilities and religious traditions that would not always sit comfortably alongside the restless, uncompromising soldier he was about to become. September 27, 1850, he was appointed a captain of the Army's Commissary Department, with his office based in St. Louis. Steady work, respectable, very much behind the scenes, but he was restless. 1853, he resigned his commission altogether and stepped into civilian life. I mean, how many times has that been done by all these guys? He took a position as manager of the San Francisco branch of the Bank of Lucas, Turner and Company, whose headquarters were also in St. Louis. All right, so he went to San Fran, huh? Must have liked it out there. Hey.
Right. Well, that move west was anything but smooth.
Yeah, you got to go through mountains.
Right, he survived 2 shipwrecks along the way.
No, he didn't go through mountains.
At one point, floating through the Golden Gate, clinging to the overturned hull of a sinking lumber schooner.
Oh. Well, see, if he could survive, then the Alcatraz guys did.
Right. It was a dramatic entrance into a city that thrived on chaos, speculation, and nerve. San Fran did not suit him well. Sherman suffered frequent asthma attacks, which he later blamed in part on the stress and relentless pressure of the city's cutthroat business culture. Well, years later, he summed up the experience with biting honesty. He said that he could handle 100,000 men in a battle and take the city of the sun, but he was afraid to manage a single lot in the swamp of San Francisco. It was one of the clearest admissions that Sherman ever made that war, not commerce, was where he felt in control. The financial world around him was just as unstable as he found it exhausting. When the collapse of Page, Bacon and Company triggered the panic surrounding Black Friday on the 23rd of February, 1855, San Fran's banking system nearly imploded. Major banks closed, businesses folded overnight, confidence gone. Through it all, Sherman managed to keep his own bank solvent. No small feat in a city teetering on financial collapse.
Look at you, bud.
1856, during San Fran's vigilante period, Sherman briefly served as a major general in the California militia. It's a short return to uniform that hinted at where his instincts still lay. But the banking troubles continued. San Francisco branch closed in May of 1857. And Sherman, he was sent to New York City on behalf of the same firm. He traveled aboard the steamer SS Central America. When the bank failed during the Panic of 1857, Sherman shut down the New York branch as well.
Early in 58, he returned to Cali one last time to settle the bank's remaining accounts. Later that year, he moved to Leavenworth, where he became office manager for a law firm run by his brothers-in-law, Hugh and Thomas.
Oh, beautiful.
Sherman even obtained a license to practice law, despite never formally studying for the bar.
Oh, whatever.
It was another attempt at reinvention, but it didn't go well. He had little success as a lawyer, just as he had little patience for civilian professions that demanded constant negotiation and uncertainty.
Right.
By the end of the decade, he had tried banking, law, business, and none of them fit. What he had learned instead was something far more valuable. He just wasn't built for speculation or compromise. He was built for command.
Ooh-wee.
That's why in 1859, he took a job that finally seemed to fit him. the suggestion of old Don Carlos Buell and with the backing of George Mason Graham, Sherman accepted the position of first superintendent of the Louisiana State Seminary of Learning and Military Academy in Pineville.
That'll be all right.
Which we all know as LSU today.
Oh.
Louisiana State University. It was a military school, huh?
Oh.
Cool. And from the beginning, he proved exactly to be what the institution needed. He ran the seminary with discipline, fairness, and energy, earning both respect and loyalty from students and faculty. Joseph P. Taylor, brother of the late President Zachary, he summed it up bluntly when he said that if you search the entire army from one end to the other, you could not find another man better suited for the position in every respect than Sherman.
Oh, nice.
Praise wasn't exaggeration either. Sherman brought structure, seriousness, and a practical military mindset to a school that was still defining itself. He said, all right, they got their Hulk Hogan for early WCW, right?
They're Chris Jericho for AEW.
Maybe.
Politically, Sherman, he occupied an uncomfortable middle ground. His younger bro, John Sherman, he was a vocal anti-slavery voice in Congress. William, by contrast, had expressed some sympathy for white Southerners and their traditional agrarian society, including slavery. I see on one hand, but on the other...
Keyword, white Southerners.
Right. But on one point, he was unyielding. Secession was madness. He believed it would destroy the country and bring catastrophic war. At the seminary, Sherman formed a close friendship with Professor David French Boyd, a Virginian and an enthusiastic secessionist.
Oh, no.
Oh. Boyd later recalled the moment news arrived that the South Carolina had split off from the Union. Sherman, normally controlled, he broke down. He burst into tears, paced the floor, spoke with a raw intensity that left a lasting impression. Boyd, he remembered Sherman warning, "You people of the South don't know what you're doing. This country will be drenched in blood, and God only knows how it will end. It is all folly, madness, a crime against civilization. You people speak so lightly of war, you don't even know what you're getting yourself into." After that, Sherman was pissed, and he left Louisiana and headed for Washington, likely hoping that his experience and reputation might land him a place back in the United States Army. At the White House, he met with old Lincoln. Just days after Lincoln's inauguration, Sherman spoke bluntly, warning that the North was dangerously unprepared for the war he believed was coming. Lincoln listened, but to Sherman, he seemed unconvinced and unmoved. The meeting, well, left Sherman uneasy and frustrated. He was sensing that the country's leadership did not yet grasp what lay ahead. They did not either.
But nothing settled in Washington. Sherman returned west and settled in St. Louis, where he took a civilian job as president of the 5th Street Railroad, which was a streetcar company. Missouri, a border state teetering between Union and secession, was one of the most volatile places in the country. Sherman tried to stay out of politics, but events made that impossible. From his vantage point, he watched Congressman Frank Blair work relentlessly to keep Missouri in the Union, efforts Sherman observed closely and would later respect deeply. Early April, Montgomery Blair offered Sherman a position as chief clerk in the War Department, promising that once Congress assembled in July, the job would lead to a nomination as Assistant Secretary of War. Sherman turned it down, though. He had no interest in political appointments and even less faith in Washington bureaucracy. Then came Fort Sumter. After the April 12th...
That changed a lot of people's minds.
Right. After the April 12th and 13th bombardment and its capture by Confederate forces, Sherman still hesitated, though. When Lincoln called for 75,000 three-month volunteers to suppress the rebellion, Sherman privately mocked the idea, reportedly saying, "Why, you might as well attempt to put out the flames of a burning house with a squirt gun."
Didn't have squirt guns back then.
Right.
Forgot it.
Did they?
I don't think so.
You think so?
There's no fucking way they had squirt guns.
They had cast iron and rubber bulbs, with the first patented version appearing in 1896. That's 1896, though.
They lied.
It said Civil War, though.
Right. The earliest that he could find is 1803.
Oh, so it was like a spray bottle to spray on apple tree worms.
Okay.
A squirt gun, but like a spray bottle. Okay. He said it, though. He said, "Why, you might as well attempt to put out the flames of a burning house with a squirt gun," which is more like a spray bottle back then. Right. It's not a squirt gun. Don't think of it like that. To Sherman, the scale of the crisis was being badly misunderstood.
It was.
By May, hesitation gave way to duty. Sherman offered his services to the regular army. His old younger brother John, along with other political allies of Lincoln, helped smooth the path. The commission came through, and Sherman returned to uniform with no illusions about what lay ahead.
Right.
June 3rd, he wrote plainly to his brother-in-law, laying out the future as he saw it. I still think it is to be a long war. Very long. Much longer than any politician thinks. Once again, Sherman is right.
Of course.
Sherman's return to uniform came fast and hard. May 14th, 1861, he was commissioned as colonel of the 13th United States Infantry Regiment.
Nice.
On paper, respectable. In reality, the regiment didn't even exist yet.
Whatever, it will.
Like much of the Union Army in those first frantic weeks, it still had to be raised, trained, and equipped, and that could take weeks, months. You never know.
Because they lost half their fucking army. Sherman's first real command came elsewhere. He was placed in charge of a brigade of 3-month volunteers, part of the division led by Daniel Tyler. Tyler's division was one of 5 in the Army of Northeastern Virginia, commanded by Irvin McDowell. He opened the very first McDowell's in New York, Queens. On July 21st, 1861, that army marched into history at the First Battle of Bull Run. The battle was a disaster. Union hopes of a quick and relatively bloodless war collapsed in a single day of confusion, panic, and retreat. Green troops broke under fire. Officers lost control. The road back to Washington filled with fleeing soldiers and civilians alike. They all came for a picnic. Bull Run shattered illusions on both sides, but especially the North. They're like, oh shit, Sherman? No, he was like, I told you. He stood out. He was one of the few Union officers to distinguish himself amid the chaos. Historian Donald Miller later described Sherman's performance at Bull Run as exemplary. During the fighting, Sherman was grazed by bullets in both the knee and the shoulder, wounds that underscored how close he stayed to the action. British military historian Brian Holden Reed, he offered a measured assessment. He said that if Sherman made tactical errors during the attack, he more than made up for them during the retreat, helping maintain what order he could as the army fell back. Holden Reed also observed that while Sherman was just as unseasoned as the men he commanded, he had not fallen victim to the naive illusions that blinded so many officers on the field.
We'll whip them, surely, right? He's like, no, don't think about that.
They'll see us and nobody will even fire shots.
Still, though, the defeat shook him. Bull Run forced Sherman to question his own judgment and the readiness of volunteer soldiers suddenly thrust into modern war.
Right.
Yet, even in defeat, he made a strong impression in Washington. When Lincoln visited the troops July 23rd, Sherman caught the president's attention. Lincoln saw competence where others saw chaos. Promotion came quickly. Sherman, he was elevated to Brigadier General of Volunteers effective May 17th, 1861. It mattered. It made Sherman's senior rank to Ulysses S. Grant, who would later become his commander and closest professional ally, as we know.
Right.
Sherman was assigned to serve under Robert Anderson in the Department of the Cumberland, headquartered in Louisville. In October, he succeeded Anderson and took command of the department himself. It was a sudden rise and one that made him deeply uncomfortable. Uh-oh, man, he's about to have a breakdown. In his memoirs, Sherman later admitted that he saw this assignment as a broken promise. Lincoln had assured him he would not be given such a prominent leadership role so early. Now, only months into the war, he found himself responsible for an entire department with too few troops, too little equipment, and a nation already learning that this war was going to be nothing like what they had imagined.
All right.
Jeez.
Right, perfect. Sherman replaced Robert Anderson in Louisville. He suddenly carried responsibility, like I said, for the military defense of Kentucky, one of the most dangerous border states in the war. Confederate forces already held Columbus and Bowling Green, with additional pressure near the Cumberland Gap. It was a wide, unstable front, and Sherman, he did not like what he saw. Almost immediately, he grew deeply pessimistic. He bombarded Washington with complaints about shortages of men, arms, and supplies. At that very same time, he produced inflated estimates of Confederate strength and demanded massive reinforcements. To Sherman, the danger was real, and it was growing fast. To officials back east, it sounded like panic. Panic. He's like, we need more shit. He's like, there's like 5 million rebels over there.
You don't even know.
Situation worsened after Secretary of War Simon Cameron. He visited Louisville in October 1861, and soon afterward, critical press coverage began to appear. They portrayed Sherman as an unstable and overwhelmed general or leader. By early November, exhausted and under fire from both the press and Washington, Sherman, he said, I just want to be relieved of command. And Washington said, we want you out too. So they relieved him. Sherman was replaced by Don Carlos Buell and transferred to St. Louis. In December, Henry Halleck, commander of the Department of the Missouri, he placed Sherman on leave. He judged him unfit for duty. Halleck sent him home to Lancaster. He said, "You go home, bud.
Yes.
You got to go."
Unfortunately for him, at Holmes, things didn't. Holmes. Unfortunately for him, at home, things didn't improve quickly. Sherman's wife, Ellen, wrote to his brother, Senator John Sherman, asking for guidance and worrying aloud about that melancholy insanity to which your family is subject. In private letters, Sherman later admitted that the pressure of command had broken him down and that he even contemplated suicide.
Oh, dang.
Matters grew worse when the Cincinnati Commercial publicly described him as insane. It was the lowest point of his life. By mid-December 1861, Sherman had recovered enough to return to duty under Halleck in the Department of the Missouri. In March, Halleck's command was expanded and redesignated the Department of the Mississippi, consolidating Union authority in the Western Theater. Sherman's assignments at first were deliberately limited. Yeah, we don't want to freak this guy out again.
Right.
He commanded an instructional barracks near St. Louis, then took charge of the district of Cairo, whatever you guys call it. Operating out of Paducah, Sherman handled logistics and support for operations led by old U.S. Grant during the campaign against Fort Donelson. Grant had just scored a major victory at Fort Henry and was given command of the loosely defined district of West Tennessee. Though Sherman technically outranked him, he made his position clear in a letter that revealed both humility and trust. I feel anxious about you as I know the great facilities have a concentration by means of the river and the railroad. But I have faith in you. Command me in any way.
Oh, man, anyway. This was a turning point in his career. The man once dismissed as unstable was finding his footing once again, not through authority, but through partnership. After the fall of Fort Donelson, Sherman finally got what he wanted. Because on the 1st of March, 1862, William Tecumseh Sherman, he was assigned to serve directly under Ulysses S. Grant in the Army of West Tennessee, commanding the 5th Division. It was a partnership that would reshape the war in the West, though its first test nearly ended in a catastrophe. The test, Battle of Shiloh.
Yeah.
April 6, 1862, rebel forces launched a massive surprise attack that caught most senior Union commanders off guard. Sherman was no exception. He dismissed intelligence reports from militia officers and refused to believe that old rebel General Albert Sidney Johnston. He's like, Johnson, he wouldn't leave his base at Corinth to strike. No
You think
way.
so?
Sherman took few precautions. He strengthened picket lines but declined to entrench, or even build a base, or even conduct extensive reconnaissance. Part of the hesitation came from memory. After Kentucky, Sherman was keenly aware of how easily caution could be labeled panic. He later admitted that he feared if he appeared too alarmed, some same voices would return. As he wrote to his wife, "If he took more precautions, they'd call me crazy again."
Crazy. When the old rebels' attack hit, Sherman was caught unprepared, but it didn't break. Under intense pressure, he rallied his division and conducted an orderly fighting retreat, slowing the Confederate advance and helping prevent a complete Union collapse on the first day. That night, as heavy rain fell across the battlefield, Sherman encountered Grant standing beneath a large oak tree, a cigar glowing faintly in the darkness. Sherman later said he felt a sudden instinct not to mention retreat and instead remarked, "Well, Grant, we've had the devil's own day, haven't we?" Grant took a puff and replied calmly, "Yes, lick 'em tomorrow, though." And they did. April 7th, Sherman played a key role in the Union counterattack that drove Confederate forces from the field. During the battle, he was wounded twice, once in the hand and once in the shoulder, and had 3 horses shot out from underneath of him. His conduct drew praise from both Grant and Halleck, and in recognition, Sherman was promoted to Major General of Volunteers effective May 1st, 1862. More importantly, Shiloh changed him. The battle restored his confidence and reshaped how he viewed both himself and the war. Biographer Robert O'Connell later wrote that Shiloh marked the turning point of Sherman's life.
Late April, Union force, about 100,000 men under Halleck, with Grant reduced to second command, began a slow advance on Corinth. Sherman commanded the division on the extreme right of the Union line, serving under General Henry Thomas. After Corinth, serving under George Henry Thomas. After Corinth fell on the 30th of May, Sherman found Grant discouraged and considering resignation. Drawing on his own experience, Sherman urged him to stay. He reminded Grant how a single newspaper accusation of madness had nearly ruined him before Shiloh, and how one battle had given him new life. Sherman told Grant that if he stayed in the army, some happy accident might restore you to favor and your true place. Grant listened. By July, Grant's fortunes improved when Halleck left for the east to become general-in-chief. Sherman, meanwhile, he was appointed military governor of occupied Memphis, stepping into a new phase of responsibility just as his confidence and clarity finally matched his ability. November 1862. Grant, now commanding Union forces in Mississippi, he launched a campaign aimed at one prize above all others: Vicksburg, the old rebel stronghold that controlled the Mississippi. Grant elevated Sherman to corps commander, placed half of his army under Sherman. It was a major vote of confidence, but also a test Sherman could not afford to fail.
Not everybody was convinced he was ready, though. Historian John Winters later wrote that at this stage, Sherman had not yet shown clear proof of great leadership. Winters pointed to Sherman's earlier breakdown in Kentucky, the hallucinations, the dark moods, and even thoughts of suicide. Sherman, he argued, was an odd blend of strength and weakness, impatient, irritable, sometimes depressed and gruff, but also a solid soldier whose men trusted him and whose fellow officers largely respected him. If Sherman failed at Vicksburg, Winters suggested his rise might end there. The campaign had begun poorly. December of 62, Sherman led his corps downriver and struck north of Vicksburg at the Battle of Chickasaw Bayou. We did that. The result was a sharp and humiliating repulse. Sherman had expected coordination with Grant advancing from another direction, but without his knowledge, Grant abandoned that movement. Oh, well, that's on Grant.
All right.
Sherman's troops ran headlong into strong defenses and were thrown back with heavy losses. Soon after that, political general John McClernand, he ordered Sherman's 15th Corps to participate in an assault on Arkansas Post. Grant despised McClernand and viewed the move as a political distraction from Vicksburg. Sherman, however, had already identified Arkansas Post as a legitimate threat to the Union River traffic, and he supported the operation.
Okay.
January 11th, 1863, Union Army and Navy forces captured the post, giving Sherman his first clear success of the campaign. Still, that pesky little Vicksburg still remained.
Not for long.
The early failures forced Grant into a radical new plan. He proposed cutting loose from traditional supply lines and marching his army deep into Mississippi, living off the land. Sherman initially doubted the wisdom of the idea, but he submitted to Grant's judgment. He submitted to Grant.
No.
And the spring campaign of 1863 solidified not just the strategy, but the personal bond between the two.
Oh.
Good for you guys. Friends, how many of us have them?
Right. Grant reorganized his army into 3 corps. The 13th Corps under McClernand, the 15th Corps under Sherman, the 17th Corps under Sherman's protege, McPherson. As the army slogged through swamps, rivers, and back roads, criticism followed. One newspaper sneered that the army was being ruined in muddy turtle-like expeditions led by a drunkard, old Ulysses S. Grant, and advised by a lunatic, old William Tecumseh Sherman. They were wrong, because on the 4th of July, 1863, after a long siege, Vicksburg fell. Mississippi River now fully under Union control. This cut the old Confederacy in half and delivering one of the most decisive strategic blows of the entire war. But work was not finished. Confederate General Joseph E. Johnston had gathered 30,000 men at Jackson, hoping to relieve the trapped garrison under John Pemberton. When Pemberton surrendered, Johnston advanced toward Grant's rear. Grant, he responded by turning Sherman loose. Sherman struck fast and hard. The Jackson expedition drove Johnston's forces away and recaptured the city by the 25th of July, 1863. The Mississippi River remained firmly in Bluecoat's hands for the rest of the war. Historians, well, they believe that especially at Jackson, that Sherman finally cut his teeth as an army commander. The doubts were gone. The failures had taught him. And the man once whispered about as unstable had emerged as one of the most formidable commanders in the whole Union Army.
Good for him.
Good for him.
Well, the old Meridian campaign closed one chapter of Sherman's career and opened up a much larger one.
Oh.
Up to this point, old William Sherman had enjoyed mixed success as commander of the Army of the Tennessee. And controversy still clung to him, especially over his role at Chattanooga. Through every setback, one thing never wavered. Old U.S. Grant trusted him completely, both as a soldier and as a friend. And that trust reshaped the war. Spring of 1864, Lincoln called Grant east to take command of all the Union armies. Grant, in turn, handed Sherman the most important field command in the West, which was the head of the military division of Mississippi. Sherman's soldiers, they had given him a nickname that stuck, Old Uncle Billy.
Uncle Bill.
The promotion placed him in charge of the Union forces across the entire Western Theater, yes.
As Grant prepared to face old Robert E. Lee in Virginia, Sherman laid out his vision for ending the war in a letter that mixed confidence with his trademark blunt humor. He said, "If you can whip Lee, I can march to the Atlantic. I think old Uncle Abe would give us 20 days leave to see the young folks." With that, Sherman turned south. He invaded Georgia with 3 armies. The Army of Cumberland, 60,000 strong, under George Henry Thomas.
What the hell are those kids do up there?
The Army of Tennessee, 25,000, under James B. McPherson. And bringing up the rear, the Army of Ohio with 13,000 troops led by John Schofield. All these together, they moved against Confederate General Joseph E. Johnston and his Army of Tennessee. He kicked his ass. Sherman avoided costly frontal assaults whenever possible. Instead, he relied on relentless flanking maneuvers through rough terrain, constantly threatened Johnston's supply lines and forcing him to retreat. Only once did Sherman gamble on a direct attack, and that was the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain. The old rebels, they won the field, but the victory changed nothing. Sherman simply shifted his lines and continued advancing toward Atlanta. He's like,
Whatever.
Yeah, whatever. In July, the old rebel leadership changed tactics. They said, no, we need to change tactics. Johnston replaced by the far more aggressive John Bell Hood. And Hood immediately challenged Sherman for direct battles. Ooh, it was exactly what Sherman wanted.
He sure did.
Hood's attacks played to the Union strength and steadily bled Confederate forces out of stupidity.
In August, amid the fighting, Sherman received unexpected news.
Oh, no.
He had been commissioned a major general in the regular army.
Okay, that works.
Sherman later admitted the honor surprised him and was not something he wanted until after Atlanta fell. He's like, what if I fail here?
Right.
Well, that fall did indeed happen, though. September 2nd, 1864. Hood abandoned Atlanta and Sherman marched in. After ordering nearly all civilians to leave the city, Sherman directed that military and government buildings be burned. Many private homes and businesses, they were consumed as well. Atlanta's capture electrified the North, and overnight Sherman became a household name. As you would guess, the political impact was enormous. Atlanta's fall all but guaranteed Lincoln's re-election in November, crushed the Copperhead faction within the Democratic Party. They'd been calling for immediate peace with the Confederacy, not so fast.
Not today, Charlie.
It also destroyed the momentum of Democratic nominee George McClellan. Yeah, that guy, whose chances had seemed strong only weeks earlier. Even at Lincoln himself, he was scared.
Yeah, I don't want to see how, though. It's just insane.
As historian Brian Holden Reed later put it, Sherman did more than any man other than the president himself to shape the public mood that carried Lincoln to victory at the polls.
Oh, shit.
Congratulations, Sherman.
All right. Wow, Sherman taking Atlanta had not just won a campaign, no. He'd altered the course of the whole entire war, the election, and the nation's future. During September of October of 1864, Sherman and Hood circled each other across northern Georgia and Alabama. A tense cat-and-mouse contest as John Bell Hood threatened Sherman's supply lines and communications to the north. Sherman saw the moment coming and pushed for a radical solution. He asked permission to cut loose entirely, sever his own supply line, and march south through Georgia. He assured Grant that if allowed, he could make Georgia howl. He said, just give me a chance, buddy. Grant said, you know what? I mean, we're riding high right now on Gettysburg and Vicksburg's victories. Go ahead.
Just 2 years earlier. Just 2 years earlier.
It's not 1861.
Gettysburg was in 1863.
Oh, it's 1864 right now.
It's damn near 65, but yeah.
Right. It's still riding high on it.
I guess.
Hood responded by marching north into Tennessee, hoping to draw Sherman after him. Sherman said, nah, but I ain't going that way.
He said, what the hell do I got to go there for?
Right.
Nope.
Sherman said, nah, I'm good. He dismissed the threat with characteristic bluntness. He reportedly said, he was recorded saying, give Hood his rations to go that way because my business is down south. Sherman left the job of dealing with Hood to George Henry Thomas and John Schofield, and they didn't disappoint because Hood's army was shattered at the Battle of Franklin on the 30th of November and effectively destroyed at Nashville on the 15th and 16th of December. With the elections behind him, Sherman turned fully to his own campaign because on the opening day of deer season, November 15th, 1864, he marched out of Atlanta with roughly 62,000 men, heading for the Atlantic coast and the port city of Savannah. His army lived off the land, dismantling railroads, seizing supplies, or wrecking infrastructure. Sherman later estimated damage about $100 million back then. His staggering figure meant not just to cripple rebel logistics, but to break the Southern will to continue the war. This movement became known, as you guessed it, Sherman's March to the Sea.
Yep.
How much is them $100 million today?
A lot.
How much do you think that is?
$2 trillion.
Oh my gosh.
Just kidding. $2 billion.
Oh, still.
December 21st, Sherman's army, they did indeed enter Savannah. Shortly after arriving, he appointed Private A.O. Granger. He was like, A.O. Granger.
A.O. Granger.
Be my personal secretary.
All right.
He then sent a message to Abraham Lincoln offering the captured city as a Christmas present. The impact on the North was immediate. Newspapers celebrated Sherman's success at a time when Grant's grinding campaign against Lee in Virginia appeared stalled. In Congress, a bill was even introduced to promote Sherman to the rank of lieutenant general, possibly even with the idea of replacing Grant as overall commander.
Wow.
That wasn't happening.
Right.
Sherman, he wanted no part of it, though. He wrote angrily to both Grant and his brother, Senator John Sherman, rejecting the idea outright.
Said it's bullshit.
Around this time, Sherman made what would become one of his most famous declarations of loyalty.
Okay.
He says, General Grant is a great general. I know him well. He stood by me when I was crazy, and I stood by him when he was drunk.
Ooh,
and now, and now, sir, we stand by each other always. Oh. Amid triumph, however, came personal loss. While in Savannah, Sherman learned from a newspaper that his infant son, Charles Celestine, had died during the campaign.
Son of a bitch.
The general had never, ever even seen the child.
I mean, I guess.
So, I mean, it kind of makes it a little more.
Right. Well, for him, at least, right?
Even at the height of victory, the war continued to take its toll, though.
Yeah, of course.
Grant's first instinct after Savannah was to have Sherman load his army into steamers and rush north to Virginia to help crush Lee. Sherman, he saw a different opportunity, though. He said, how about I march overland through the Carolinas and do more damage, burn the shit out of those, and then I'll meet you up there. Perfect. He said, I'll wreck what remains of Southern war, making power along the way, just as he had in Georgia. Grant said, fuck it, do it, buddy. Sherman had one state especially in mind.
South Carolina.
No, it was.
the
ones that caused it all, basically.
And indeed, it was South Carolina. Sherman believed striking it hard would have a powerful psychological effect. His army moved north against light resistance from forces under Johnston.
He was like, I just threw you out of fucking Georgia. What are you going to do now?
When Johnston heard reports that Sherman's men were advancing across the flooded Sockahocksee swamps on corduroy roads at nearly a dozen miles a day, he reportedly concluded that no such army had existed since the time of Julius Caesar.
Oh.
Wow. February 17th, 1865. War just about over. Sherman entered Columbia, the state capital. That very night, fires broke out. By the morning, much of the city laid in ruins. The burning of the Columbia immediately became one of the most controversial episodes of the war. Some claimed it was deliberate Union vengeance. Others argued the destruction was accidental. It was windy that night, and burning cotton bales left behind by retreating Confederates. What do you think's going to happen?
A little bit of both.
Right. Well, that argument has never been settled by either side. From South Carolina, Sherman pushed into North Carolina. Native American lumber guides helped his army across the flooded Lumber River. Days of torrential rain has flooded it. Sherman later described the march through the swamps, the Pocassins, and the creeks of Robeson County as the damnedest marching I've ever saw. Despite the hardship, his troops caused relatively little civilian damage in North Carolina. Unlike South Carolina, Union soldiers generally viewed the state as a reluctant Confederate.
They had no choice.
Having succeeded second to last, ahead of only Tennessee. Yeah, so they're like, all right, we'll give it a little. Isn't that crazy? The only battle of Sherman's entire march through Georgia and the Carolinas that was a major one came at the Battle of Bentonville, which we've done.
Yes.
It was falling on the 19th through the 21st of March in 1865, about 2 weeks before the war ended. There, Sherman defeated Johnston's army once again. Afterward, Sherman marched to Goldsboro, linking up with Union forces that had captured the coastal cities of New Bern and Wilmington. He's just wreaking havoc and just whooping Johnston's ass. It's like he's holding his coattail and kicking him and catching him again and kicking him again. Wow, poor Johnston. I don't know if you don't have no forts named after him or anything.
Who, Sherman?
Johnston.
Oh, he might have. Back in the day.
I mean, a cemetery.
In late March, Sherman briefly left his army and traveled to City Point to meet with Grant. By coincidence, old Abe was there as well.
Why would Abe be there in Quinkydink?
Why not? The meeting produced the only three-way... Whoa.
Hey, that's why Abe was there.
The meeting produced the only three-way conference of Lincoln, Grant, and Sherman during the war.
Oh, shit.
Also with the Admiral of the Navy, David Dixon Porter, there. Damn, we got all the big wigs.
Fuck yeah.
The moment was later immortalized in the painting The Peacemakers.
Oh, no shit.
Returning to North Carolina, Sherman marched on the capital at Raleigh, began communicating with Johnson about possible terms to end the fight. And he said, come on, guys, it's time. April 9th, 1865, Sherman gathered his troops and passed along the news that changed everything. Guess what, boys? Lee, he just surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse.
Oh.
The Army of Northern Virginia, no longer.
Wow.
The war, for all practical purposes, was over.
Pretty much.
After Lee's surrender and the shock of Abraham Lincoln's assassination just a couple days later, April 14th,
insane.
Sherman moved quickly to end the war in the Carolinas.
It's so crazy that the United States didn't get overran by multiple countries. Civil War, your president shot. It's just all out chaos in the United States, and nobody did nothing.
What are they going to do?
Right now, that was a perfect chance to strike.
What are they going to do?
If France and Britain were like, come on, boys, let's work together. We can take these motherfuckers
Well,
out.
France and Britain wasn't working together. That's for damn sure.
Right.
Yeah, that was not possible.
No.
Sherman, he moved quickly to end April 17th. He met with Confederate General Joseph Johnson at Bennett Place to negotiate surrender terms.
Johnson, you should have surrendered a long time ago, bud.
Well, and now he goes down in history as the last major army to do so. At Johnson's urging, though, and with the influence of Confederate President Jefferson Davis, and I guess the Secretary of War, John Breckinridge, Sherman agreed to sweeping and unusually generous conditions that addressed not only military surrender, but political restoration as well.
No shit. That's bullshit.
He's like, the president just got assassinated. We need healing.
All right.
April 20th, they all lit up a bunch of blunts. And Sherman, he said, forward these terms of Washington, boys.
Right. Wow. Good for that, right?
Yeah, he wasn't supposed to do that.
No, Sherman believed he was acting in the spirit of Lincoln's wishes. This is based on their conversation at City Point. He was convinced that leniency was the best way to prevent Johnson's army from dissolving into the countryside and waging a bitter guerrilla war. You don't want that. What Sherman did not have was authorization. He had acted without the approval of Grant, or from the cabinet, or from the very new president, Andrew Johnson. So the political...
We already know these two are going to go at it.
All right, so that political mood changed overnight. Lincoln's assassination hardened attitudes in Washington.
Yeah, they're like, fuck these guys. They don't deserve nothing.
Right. Reconciliation was suddenly out of favor. The Johnson administration rejected Sherman's terms outright. Grant had to step in to shield Sherman from possible dismissal for exceeding his authority. Matters grew worse when Secretary of War Edward Stanton leaked Sherman's memorandum to the New York Times. What a piece of shit.
Yeah, Stanton.
Wow.
What a dick.
This implied that Sherman might have been bribed to allow Jefferson Davis to escape. Oh, wow. The accusation, of course, was baseless. And the damage, well, was permanent.
Permanent.
Ignited a deep and lasting hatred between Sherman and Stanton.
Yep.
And also reinforced Sherman's lifelong contempt for politicians. He's like, you piece of shits. You motherfuckers. Grant, well, he reset the process. He instructed Johnson to accept purely military terms, modeled on the surrender Grant had negotiated with Lee at Appomattox. Johnson, disregarding direct orders from Davis, he said, you know what?
Yeah. What else am I going to do?
Right, I'm good. 26
Basically, Grant's like, you can either do this or we'll just take you in custody. And
he's like, let me see what Davis, what you got? Davis ain't nobody, guy. Right. 26th of April, 1865, Johnston formally surrendered his army and called all remaining Confederate forces in the Carolinas, Georgia, and Florida. He said, we're done, guys. It was the largest single surrender of that very war. The fighting was finally over. May 1865, Sherman traveled north with portions of his army to Washington. On the 24th of May, his troops marched down Pennsylvania Avenue, all hooting and hollering in the grand review of the armies. A triumphant procession that marked the end of the 4 years of bloodshed and in a nation at war. Sherman rode at the head of veterans who had marched from the Mississippi to the Atlantic and back again.
damn right. Rode Sherman, the war ended not with celebration, but with a mixture of vindication, exhaustion, and bitterness.
I mean, I'm right.
Not only had he helped win the Union's greatest victories, but the final chapter had left scars that would never fully heal.
Yeah.
Sherman's views on race were complicated, uncomfortable, and very much shaped by his time.
Right.
Before the war, he was not an abolitionist, and like many men of his background, he didn't even believe in racial equality.
I mean,
he expressed some sympathy for Southern whites, who argued that enslaved black people benefited materially from slavery, though he opposed breaking up slave families and supporting repealing laws that forbade enslaved people from being educated. Oh, wow.
Wow.
Repealing laws. Oh, yeah, repealing the laws so they can be educated.
Right.
Throughout the war, though, Sherman consistently refused to employ black troops in his armies. It's a position that put him at odds with many in the Republican Party.
I mean, come on.
In his memoirs, he later addressed the political pressure he faced in 64 and 65 to encourage mass slave escapes. One motive behind those efforts, he noted, was to prevent able-bodied enslaved men from being used by the Confederacy.
Yeah.
Sherman rejected that logic outright, though. He believed such a policy would slow the war and delay the complete liberation of enslaved people.
Right.
He says, "My aim then was to whip the rebels, to humble their pride, to follow them to their inmost recesses and make them fear and dread us.
Damn right.
Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
Ooh.
Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. I did not want them to cast in our teeth what General Hood had once done at Atlanta, what we had to call on their slaves to help us to subdue them."
Oh. Well, despite this stance, the reality on the ground overtook policy. Tens of thousands of formerly enslaved people attached themselves to Sherman's columns during the marches,
They did.
moving as refugees behind the army. Their presence.
Sherman's like, I can't feed all you guys. We're living off the land.
You want to follow us, but I can't promise you rations. Their presence quickly became a humanitarian, military, and political problem. Conditions harsh, supplies limited, disease everywhere.
Rapid.
Disease everywhere. Abolitionists accused Sherman of doing little to protect them. Criticism serious enough to prompt Secretary of War Edwin Stanton to travel south in January of 1865 to see the situation firsthand. He's like, all right, what the hell's going on here? 12th of January in Savannah, Sherman and Stanton met with 20 local black leaders, most of them Baptist or Methodist ministers. They were invited at Sherman's request. Historian Eric Foner, he said that the exchange was a rare moment where the realities of slavery and the hopes shaping Reconstruction came into sharp focus. They're like, oh, wait a minute here. We still got to deal with you guys. How are we going to do that? Damn, guess we shouldn't have burned down all those damn
all those slave orders.
The group spokesman, Baptist Minister Garrison Frazier. He spoke with striking clarity about freedom, land, and independence. After Sherman left the meeting, Frazier was asked how the black community viewed the general. His response, unequivocal. He says, we looked upon General Sherman prior to his arrival as a man in the providence, sound like an old white man.
I mean, black people had country accents.
We looked upon General Sherman prior to his arrival as a man in the providence of God, specially set apart to accomplish this work, and we unanimously feel inexpressible gratitude to him, looking upon him as a man that should be honored for the faithful performance of his duty. Some of us called upon him immediately upon his arrival, and it is probable we would not meet the secretary with more courtesy than he met us. His conduct and deportment toward us characterize him as a friend and a gentleman.
And a scholar, right?
4 days later, Sherman issued Special Field Orders number 15. The order set aside confiscated land along the coast, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, for the settlement of about 40,000 freed people and black refugees.
He's like, maybe a hurricane will take him out.
Right. He placed the program under the supervision of Rufus Saxon. Well, Rufus was an abolitionist officer who had previously overseen the recruitment of black soldiers. The order became the origin of the enduring promise remembered as 40 acres and a mule.
That people mistake as the actual federal government promised, but it never happened.
Well, that promise was short-lived because 1865, Andrew Johnson said, no, I don't think so. He returned much of the land to the former white owners.
Even after the wall. Even after the war, Sherman's racial views remained controversial. Some Republicans regarded him as deeply prejudiced, and his wartime record gave him reason. Yet his attitudes didn't remain fixed. Over time, Sherman dealt with black Americans in what contemporaries described as a friendly and unaffected manner. His thinking evolved slowly but unmistakably. In 1888, near the end of his life, Sherman published an essay in the North American Review that surprised many of his critics. In it, He defended full civil rights for black citizens in the former Confederacy and issued a stark warning to the South. He urged Southerners to let black men vote and to count those votes honestly.
Oh.
Adding that if they did not, another war would come. No, that's not.
All right.
Stoking some fire there, bud. One more brutal than the last, he said, where torch and dagger would replace the musket of organized armies.
Oh.
For a man often remembered only for destruction, it was a reminder that Sherman's legacy, like the country he helped reshape, was never simple. Long after the smoke cleared, Sherman's campaigns kept fighting new wars on paper. Historians credit Sherman with mastering what he called maneuver warfare, or the indirect approach.
Right.
Instead of smashing head-on to strong defenses, this style aimed to defeat an enemy through shock, disruption, speed, and surprise, forcing them out of position before they could properly react.
Oh.
To historians, Sherman's method of war was not just effective, it was modern. He ushered in like the new modern era of war.
Right.
No more standing in a fucking line, shooting each other in the face.
Stupid. He pointed especially to Sherman's Atlanta campaign. This is where Sherman repeatedly used turning movements to force the old rebel general Joseph Johnson to retreat without even risking costly frontal assaults. Gain and again, Sherman slid around Johnson's flank, threatened supply lines, and made staying put impossible. Johnson, he was rarely beaten outright, but he was steadily displaced, which, in historians' views, was the whole point. The historians went even further. They argued that studying Sherman played a major role in shaping his own theories of strategy and tactics and mechanized warfare. Mechanized. Those ideas, he claimed, it later influenced German military thinkers such as Heinz Guderian and even Erwin Rommel, particularly in their use of speed, mobility, and the armored forces during the Second War.
Oh, good for you, Sherman. You just fucking
right
responsible for
killing
the Jews.
He didn't know. Sherman's influence did not stop there. Another student of Liddell's Hart's writing on Sherman was American General George S. Patton. Patton reportedly spent a long vacation walking Sherman's old routes across Georgia and the Carolinas.
Wasn't it Patton that had a picture of Lee and Stonewall Jackson on his wall? And
I believe so.
Said they were Jesus or something like that? Like he worshipped him?
Right. Oh, wow. Yeah, he walked the routes of the Georgias and the Carolinas. He had a book in hand, studying the ground exactly as Sherman had once did. When Patton later unleashed his own rapid, aggressive advances across Europe, observers noted the resemblance. Bold movement, relentless pressure, and the instinct for keeping the enemy off balance. As Patton himself put it through action rather than words, he was fighting what could only be described as a Super Sherman style.
Super Sherman style.
He even ran like that.
A century later, Sherman was no longer just a Civil War general. He's fucking dead in the ground, obviously. He'd become a case study in how wars would be fought in the age of engines, armor, and motion. Like old Grant and Lincoln, Sherman believed the Confederacy could not be negotiated into submission. Its ability to wage war militarily, economically, and psychologically had to be broken outright. To Sherman, anything less meant the fighting would simply drag on or erupt again later. Right. That conviction shaped everything he did in the final years of the war. He believed the North had to fight a war of conquest. Not conquest for territory alone, but conquest of will. Civilian supplies, transportation networks, and economic infrastructure all supported Confederate armies, and Sherman made no distinction between them. Modern historian Mark Grimsley, he later described this approach as hard war, a term meant to distinguish it from both limited warfare and the far more industrialized total wars that we see now. Some historians have labeled Sherman's campaigns an early form of total war, though others strongly dispute that framing because they always do. Brian Holden Reed argued the concept of total war fits the Civil Wars. Fits the World Wars far better than the Civil War. And then applying it, because in the World War, they were literally going out and just destroying whole cities.
Yeah.
And then applying it to Sherman's risks, oversimplifying what was actually happening.
Damn right.
What wasn't disputed is the scale of destruction. Sherman's marches through Georgia and the Carolinas deliberately targeted railroads, warehouses, mills, crops, livestock. Civilian property suffered enormously. Looting was officially forbidden, but we already know what happened there.
Right.
Exact numbers are impossible to calculate, but civilian deaths appear to have been relatively few compared to the massive destruction. Sherman's stated goal wasn't slaughter, it was paralysis. Got to cut off everything that they can. They're not going to fucking survive this war.
Nope. That philosophy was made explicit after the fall of Atlanta, 1864. Sherman ordered the city evacuated. Atlanta's city council protested, warning of suffering for women, children, and the elderly. Sherman said, well, you know what? Sherman responded with a written letter that became one of the most famous documents of the whole entire war. He laid bare his thinking without apology. He said, you cannot qualify war in harsher terms than I will. War is cruelty, and you cannot refine it. And those who brought war into our country deserve all the curses and maledictions a people can pour out. I know I had no hand in making this war. I know I will make more sacrifice today than any of you to secure peace. But you cannot have peace in a division of our country. If the United States submits to a division now, it will not stop, but will go on until we reap the fate of Mexico, which is eternal war.
Well, I got news for you, Sherman.
I want peace and believe it can only be reached through union and war. And I will ever conduct war with a view to perfect and early success. And I will ever conduct a war with a view to perfect and early success. For Sherman, cruelty...
You got to pronounce words right.
Right. For Sherman, cruelty was not the point. Finality was. One of the most visible tactics was the systematic destruction of railroads. Union soldiers tore up tracks, heated the rails over fires, and twisted them
Sherman's neckties.
Right, and twisted them to useless shapes that became known as Sherman's neckties. Repairs were nearly impossible for the old Rebs, short on iron, tools, and heavy machinery. It was a simple act with enormous strategic impact. Right, they've been destroying railroads the whole fucking war. Not that bad, though, huh?
Well, the damage inflicted by Sherman's army was uneven. It was noticeably harsher in South Carolina than in Georgia or North Carolina. We know why. Many Union soldiers viewed South Carolina as the birthplace of secession. It's the place where the war began, and resentment followed them into the state.
Sure did.
That bitterness fueled one of the war's most enduring controversies, which was the burning of Columbia. Some pro-Confederate sources later claimed that Union troops deliberately burned the city. Others cited statements attributed to Oliver Otis Howard, suggesting Union responsibility. Well, they burnt it, right? Sherman denied this outright, though. He stated that if he had chosen to burn Columbia, he would have done so openly and without hesitation. Instead, he blamed Confederate Lieutenant General Wade Hampton and accused him of ordering cotton burned in the streets during the evacuation. In his memoirs, Sherman admitted he emphasized Hampton's responsibility deliberately, hoping to undermine Hampton's standing among South Carolinians as well.
Modern scholarship has largely rejected simple explanations. Historian James McPherson, he concluded that responsibility was shared.
Hey, James McPherson, wasn't that a general name?
Yeah. Confederate authorities, they left thousands of cotton bales in the streets, many already burned, large quantities of alcohol unsecured. Union soldiers contributed to the chaos, but many, including Sherman himself, worked through the night trying to extinguish all the fires. Columbia burned, but not by a single hand.
Well, clearly.
Elsewhere, Sherman showed restraint. After Lincoln's assassination, Sherman and subordinates such as John Logan, they took active steps to prevent acts of revenge and rally. North Carolina is viewed as a reluctant Confederate state. It was spared. It got spared the level of destruction inflicted farther south. Yeah, North Carolina, they had no choice.
Sherman and those who served him, with him, the logic of hard war was grim but consistent. Major Henry Hitchcock, an Alabama native on Sherman's staff, summed it up bluntly. Destroying the means of survival for thousands was terrible, he wrote. But if it shortened the war and broke the power of those fighting in it, then in the end it was mercy. Sherman never pretended his methods were humane either. He argued instead that they were honest. And in his mind, they were the fastest path to peace.
Honest and necessary.
Hey, man, isn't that like the same thing the United States argued when they killed 60 million people innocently, or whatever it was, 100,000 people innocently with bombs?
Right.
We'll drop these bombs on these guys, and then we'll save millions of lives.
Right.
But by the time the shooting stopped, Sherman had no illusions left about war. May of 1865, after the major Confederate armies had surrendered, he wrote privately with a candor that's cut straight through any lingering romance about victory.
Okay.
In a personal letter to somebody, he admitted, "I confess without shame, I am sick and tired of fighting. Its glory is all moonshine. Even success, the most brilliant, is over dead and mangled bodies. With the anguish and the lamentations of distant families, appealing to me for sons, husbands, and fathers.
Right.
'Tis only those who have never heard a shot, never heard the shriek and groans of the wounded and lacerated. It's only those that cry aloud for more blood, more vengeance, more desolation.
Ooh.
It's true. It's always the ones that aren't doing the shit that want you to do it.
It was the voice of a man who had seen the war end not in triumph, but in exhaustion. June 1865, just 2 months after Lee's surrender, Sherman received his first major post-war command, initially called the Military Division of the Mississippi, and later renamed the Military Division of the Missouri. It encompassed a staggering expanse of territory stretching from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains. It was the largest command in the United States Army. His mission, you ask? Well, it shifted from defeating armies to managing peace on the restless frontier. His responsibilities? Well, it focused on protecting the main overland, the routes of western expansion, including the Oregon Trail, the Bozeman Trail, the Santa Fe Trail. Wagon trains, settlers, mail routes, supply lines, they all demand military protection, often simultaneously, and often urgently. The problem? Well, the scale.
It's too big.
Sherman had limited troops to cover an enormous region, and requests for military escorts and garrisons poured in faster than he could even possibly satisfy them. The work was administrative, it was political, and it was deeply frustrating. After commanding hundreds of thousands of men in war, Sherman found himself buried in petitions, complaints, and impossible expectations. He said, fuck this shit, this is wearing me down.
But still, his stature had only continued to grow. July 25th, 1866, the Congress, they created a new rank, which was General of the Army. That was specifically for old U.S. Grant. At the same time, Sherman was promoted to Grant's former rank of Lieutenant General, formally placing him just one step below his closest friend and partner in war. For Sherman, the promotions were acknowledgments, not reward.
Right.
The war had been won, but at a cost he never stopped counting. And he turned himself from battlefield to frontier, his writings made one thing unmistakably clear. No one who truly understood war ever wished for another one. For the first several years after the war, his Western Command didn't immediately erupt into full-scale conflict. During the initial 3 years of his tenure as divisional commander, he allowed negotiations between the United States government and Native Americans to proceed, while he quietly strengthened his scattered forces and waited for the completion of the Union Pacific and Kansas Pacific railroads. Those rail lines, he believed, would determine the future of the frontier far more than any single battle.
Right.
During this period, Sherman served as a member of the Indian Peace Commission. The commission oversaw negotiations that produced the Medicine Lodge Treaty and the Treaty of Fort Laramie. Sherman, however, played only a limited role in drafting those agreements. In both cases, he was summoned back to Washington before negotiations concluded. One of those summons had nothing to do with Indian affairs at all. What did it have to do with?
Right.
Well, he was called as witness in the impeachment trial of old Andrew Johnson.
Good, that piece of shit.
And he did indeed testify April 11th and 13th, 1868.
Wow. Good for him. I'm glad he did. Sherman did, however, take a more direct role in other negotiations. He successfully helped arrange the removal of the Navajo from the disastrous Bosque Redondo Reservation and the return to their traditional lands. And where are those lands, you ask? Western New Mexico. It was one of the few Indian policy outcomes Sherman regarded as an unqualified success. But, as usual, peace did not last. When the Medicine Lodge agreements collapsed in 1868, Sherman authorized his subordinate, Philip Sheridan, to launch the winter campaign of 1868 to 69. Sheridan applied the same hard war tactics he and Sherman had refined during the Civil War. He culminated in the Battle of the Washita River. Sherman improved the methods and the logic behind them.
Of course he would.
1871, Sherman personally ordered that the leaders of the Warren Wagon Trail raid be tried for murder in Jacksboro. The attack had been carried out by Kiowa and Comanche warriors. Sherman himself had narrowly escaped. The resultant civilian trial of Chiefs Santana and Big Tree marked the first time ever that Native American leaders were tried for murder in the United States civilian court. No shit. Throughout his Western Command, Sherman viewed railroad expansion as a central strategic issue of the frontier. He called it the most important element now in progress to facilitate the military interest of our frontier. Which is true, right? I mean,
yeah, you gotta have a way to get there. And if you need a bunch of shit transported,
right. Protecting rail construction and operation became one of his highest priorities. He regarded native resistance primarily through that lens.
His language on Indian affairs could be brutal. I mean, after the Fetterman Massacre of 1866, in which 81 soldiers were killed, he telegraphed Grant and said that we must act with vindictive earnestness against the Sioux, even to their extermination. Men, women, and children.
Damn, so just get rid of these sons of bitches. They're like wasps. They do nothing.
Yeah, and then when you get close to their nests, they just swarm you.
Right.
The following year, he wrote that we're not going to let a few thieving, ragged Indians check and stop the progress of the railroads. In an 1873 private letter, he stated flatly that during combat, soldiers could not pause to distinguish age or sex, adding that once resistance ended, survivors should be turned over to Indian agents. And basically, it doesn't matter what age they are or who they are, kill them.
Yeah. Wow.
He also believed that the destruction of the bison was inevitable and should be encouraged.
That was bullshit. That was bullshit.
He viewed the eradication of the herds as a way to break native resistance and force assimilation. He said, these guys aren't going to hunt for their own shit. They're going to buy processed foods from us one day. He expressed this belief openly, including before a joint session of the Texas legislature in 1875. While the Army itself did not conduct organized bison extermination under his command, Sherman actively encouraged private hunting.
Yeah.
When Congress passed legislation in 1874 to protect the bison from overhunting, Sherman helped persuade Grant to kill the bill with a pocket veto. He said, let's stick this in our pocket for now.
Wow.
Jeez.
By the end of his Western service, Sherman had become as controversial in peace as he had in war. His actions helped open the frontier to railroad and settlement, but they also accelerated displacement and suffering of natives. Just as the Civil War, Sherman believed harsh measures shortened conflict. Whether they instead ensured that another chapter of violence would follow remains one of the most enduring debates of his legacy. Grant became president in 1969. Sherman moved into the final and most politically fraught chapter of his career. He was appointed commanding general of the United States Army, promoted to the rank of full general.
Full general.
Placing him at the very top of the military pecking order.
That's not true because the president's commander-in-chief. But
Right. After the sudden death of John Rawlins, Sherman even served briefly as Secretary of War, a role that only reinforced how uneasy he was with civilian politics. It's like, fuck this shit.
Well, that unease quickly turned to frustration. His early years as commanding general were plagued by disputes with Rawlins and later with William Belknap. Sherman believed both men had stripped authority from the Army's senior officer and reduced the position of commanding general to little more than a ceremonial title.
Right, you can't do that.
He bristled at what he saw was interference from Washington and resented being boxed in by bureaucrats who had never commanded troops in their life.
Damn right.
Or the field.
Right.
Sherman also found himself at odds with Eastern reformers and humanitarians who condemned the Army's conduct during the Indian Wars.
Oh, fuck off. Go out there and fight them then.
They don't want to fight them.
Exactly.
In Sherman's view, many of these critics underestimated the realities of frontier conflict.
Right.
He suspected they had found a sympathetic ear in President Grant himself.
Oh, he's getting soft in his old age.
Tired of constant political infighting, Sherman moved his headquarters west to St. Louis. He said, get out of fucking Washington, dude.
I'm going to St. Louis.
And that was in 1874. He didn't return until 76 after the appointment of Alphonso Taft, who promised Sherman greater independence and authority. He's all right.
Wow, much of Sherman's time as commanding general was spent overseeing continued military operations in the West. His mandate was to make the plains and western states safe for settlement. This was a mission that carried the Army into three major conflicts: the Modoc War, the Great Sioux War of 1876, and the Nez Perce War. Sherman's policies toward native resistance remained hard-edged, but his record was not one-dimensional. Even as he sanctioned military campaigns, he spoke out forcefully against corrupt speculators and dishonest government agents who exploited native communities confined to reservations. Yeah. It's like, all right, we got him there. Treat him humanely, will ya? To Sherman, incompetence and corruption were as damaging as open warfare, which is true.
During the same period, he reorganized the Army's network of western forts, adapting them to a frontier that was shifting rapidly as railroads expanded and settlement followed. His focus was always structural and logistical. He believed the Army had to evolve with the country. It was policing, obviously. 1875, a decade after the war ended, he entered the public arena in a new way. He became one of the first major Union commanders to publish memoirs. The Memoirs of General William T. Sherman, it was called. by himself, released in 2 volumes by D. Appleton and Company. It traced his life beginning in 1846 at the outbreak of the Mexican War and concluded with the reflections on the military lessons of the Civil War.
Okay.
The book caused immediate controversy.
Oh, jeez.
Former allies and enemies alike objected to how Sherman portrayed events and personalities.
Hey, you don't like it? I'm going to tell you.
Grant, who's still president, obviously, was told by others that Sherman had treated him unfairly in his book. But after reading the memoirs himself, Grant disagreed completely.
He said, nah, you guys are idiots.
He said the book was true, honorable, credible to Sherman, and just to his companions, himself included.
Damn right.
He said it was exactly the book Grant expected Sherman to write. I mean, well, that's him.
Fuck yeah.
Literary critics took notice as well. Edmund Wilson later wrote that Sherman possessed a trained gift for self-expression.
Aw.
Quoting Mark Twain, Wilson described Sherman as a master of narrative.
Fuck yeah.
Sherman, Wilson observed, never struck poses or pretended to feel emotions he did not.
All right.
I did not.
All right.
Readers experienced the campaigns as if they were marching alongside with him.
Fuck yeah.
Hearing not only what he did, but what he thought and felt along the way.
Oh, that's fantastic. Everybody loves a good story.
Look at that.
Wow, even as a senior officer, Sherman
Wasn't trying to prop shit up and
right.
overblow shit like all these other fucks that did memoirs.
Yeah, even as a senior officer, Sherman continued shaping the Army's identity. Because in 1872, he introduced the shoulder strap insignia that symbolized his rank as General of the Army. 4 years later, and during the disputed election of 1876, violence erupted in Charleston as Southern Democrats supporting Wade Hampton sought to intimidate black voters. Republican Governor Daniel Henry Chamberlain, he appealed for federal help. Grant responded by ordering Sherman to gather available Atlantic region troops and deploy them to South Carolina. He said, I want you to restore order, Bubba. It was one of the last times Sherman will be called upon to intervene directly in a domestic crisis. Sherman's public speeches during this period cemented one of the most endearing phases associated with his name.
Or phrases, yeah.
June of 1879, he delivered a calm, uplifting address to graduates of the Michigan Military Academy, carefully avoiding graphic language. Just 1 year later, on the 12th of August, 1880, he spoke before a crowd of more than 10,000 in Columbus, Ohio. He dropped the restraint.
He said, I'm swearing everything here.
He warned young men who saw war as a glory that it was, in truth, hell. Don't you think by any chance that this is going to be good. It's pure hell.
Not an actual quote, but yeah.
A reporter soon shortened the quote, and by 1881, the phrase, war is hell, had entered the American lexicon permanently. And we still see that today. 1880, Sherman organized and accompanied President Ruther B. Hayes.
With the Ford in there somewhere.
Sherman organized and accompanied President Hayes on the first presidential tour of the West Coast. Another milestone in a nation still binding itself together after the Civil War. One of Sherman's most lasting institutional contributions followed shortly after, because in 1881 he established the command school at Fort Leavenworth, the forerunner of today's Command and General Staff College. Oh. It was designed to professionalize the officer corps and ensure future wars would be led by trained thinkers rather than improvisers.
Yeah, that's where you get people who go to like the military academy or whatever. They become officers immediately.
Right.
Well, Sherman stepped down as commanding general November 1st, 1883. February 8th, the next year, his 64th birthday, he officially retired from the Army under mandatory retirement rules.
Aww.
That'd be 64. He left behind a force profoundly shaped by his ideas, his discipline, and his refusal to romanticize war.
Yeah, fuck that. A lot of people like to.
By the end of his life, Sherman had become something rare. A victorious general who despised war, a destroyer who believed destruction could save lives in the long run, and a blunt, uncompromising figure who nonetheless shaped the modern American military more deeply than most men who ever wore its uniform. After retiring, he spent most of the remainder of his life in New York City.
Oh, New York City.
The pace was slower, but he was anything but idle. He threw himself into the theater.
Oh.
Developed a love for amateur painting.
No.
And became a familiar and much sought after presence at dinners and banquets.
Oh.
He enjoyed the spotlight on his own terms, often entertaining crowds with sharp stories and a fond habit of quoting William Shakespeare.
Good for him.
Despite being removed from command, Sherman never drifted far from the world he helped build. or shape.
All right.
He stayed in close contact with fellow veterans and took an active role in a variety of social and charitable organizations.
Good for him.
The war was over, but the bonds it created remained central to his life.
That's right.
I mean, obviously.
Right. Politics. Well,
However,
it was something he wanted no part of. As the presidential election of 1884 approached, Sherman's name resurfaced as a potential Republican candidate. The suggestion did not flatter him. It made him pissed.
he's like, fuck you.
Sherman shut it down with unmistakable finality. He declared, "I will not accept if nominated, and I will not serve if elected." Damn. Everybody's like, "What's up with him?" The statement was so the statement was so absolute that it entered political vocabulary. Ever since then, an ironclad refusal to run for office has been known as the Shermanesque statement. 1886, after the publication of Grant's memoirs, Sherman returned once more to his life story.
He's like, damn it, I got to revise some things.
Right. He issued a second edition of his memoirs, revised and corrected. And this time it was published by Appleton again.
Right. This time again, yes.
This expanded version added a new preface, a chapter covering his life up to 1846.
He's like, wait a minute, Grant did his childhood?
Right. And then another part dealing with the post-war years to his retirement in 1884, along with appendices, portraits, improvised maps that were improved, and a proper index. All right, you gotta have that index.
See what you're doing here.
Hey, where's the index?
What he did not do was rewrite his original narrative, though.
Mm-mm.
He refused to substantially revise the text,
I wouldn't.
explaining he didn't see himself as a historian. No need to do that. Somebody else can do that shit, and they will. Trust me. Instead, he was a witness testifying. Instead, he said he was a witness testifying before the great tribunal of history. If others disagreed with his account, he insisted they were free to publish their own versions. Sherman believed memory was personal, responsibility unavoidable, and history big enough to hold competing truths.
All right, that's very true.
Still, in a limited concession, he did include the perspectives of some critics and contemporaries in the appendices.
I mean, you got to.
It was a fitting final note. Even in retirement, Sherman remained stubbornly himself. Opinionated, candid, unwilling to soften his edges, and he was uninterested in pleasing anyone at the cost of honesty. He had spent a lifetime shaping events rather than chasing approval, and in the end, it didn't really matter.
Nope.
He left a final judgment where he believed it belonged, with history itself.
William Tecumseh Sherman died of pneumonia, New York City, 1:50 p.m., Valentine's Day, 1891. 6 days after his 71st birthday. News of his death traveled quickly. President Harrison, who had once served under Sherman, ordered all national flags lowered half-staff and sent a personal telegram to the family. In a formal message to Congress, Harrison offered a tribute that captured the balance of Sherman himself, always insisted upon. He wrote that Sherman was an ideal soldier who fully shared the spirit of the Army, yet cherished the civil institutions created by the Constitution, serving as a soldier only so that those institutions might endure in honor and usefulness. 19th February, just 5 short days after the passing, a funeral service was held at Sherman's home, followed by a military procession throughout the city. Among the pallbearers was one figure who drew particular notice. You guessed it, Joseph E. Johnston, the rebel commander who had opposed Sherman in Georgia and the Carolinas, walked beside that very coffin. It was a brutally cold day. A friend urged Johnston to put on his hat to protect himself, and Johnston said no. He replied that if Sherman were in his place and he himself lay in this very coffin, Sherman would not have worn his hat. Johnston, you all know what happens after that. He caught a severe cold and died of pneumonia a month later.
He sure did.
Wow.
Well, Sherman's body was then transported west to St. Louis, where a second funeral service was held at a Catholic church February 21st. His son, Thomas Ewing Sherman, he presided over the funeral masses in both New York and St. Louis.
Wow.
And among those in attendance was former President and fellow Civil War veteran Rutherford B. Hayes, who later remarked that Sherman had been the most interesting and original character in the world. Sherman was laid to rest in Calvary Cemetery. In death, as in life, Sherman drew together contradictions with that few figures could reconcile. He was feared and admired, blamed and credited, mourned by former enemies, and honored by the nation he helped preserve. He despised war, yet understood it more clearly than most who ever commanded armies.
That's usually how it goes.
And long after the last cannon fell silent, his words, his marches, and his hard conclusions continued to shape how Americans understood both war and peace.
Fuck yeah.
In the years immediately after the war, he occupied an unusual place in American memory. In the North, he was popular and widely admired, especially by the soldiers who had served under him. Many of those men credited him not just with victory, but with honesty. He never pretended the war had been glorious, and they trusted him for that. In the South, though, reaction is a little more complicated.
Yeah, I can see why.
Sherman was generally respected as a capable and serious military professional. His conservative politics made him more acceptable to many white Southerners than other Union leaders,
Wow.
especially during the early years of Reconstruction. But that balance did not last.
Never does. Wow, that's because in the 1880s, Southern Lost Cause writers began reshaping Sherman into a villain.
The whole Lost Cause is the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
Stupid publications like Confederate Veteran, based in Nashville, devoted more attention to Sherman than to any other Union general. Part of that focus helped elevate the Western theater of the war, which Lost Cause narratives had often neglected. But the deeper purpose was morale. In this new telling, the destruction of the railroads, the destruction of the cops, the plantations, the cops, the destruction of the crops, the burning of the plantations that mattered less than what Sherman was said to represent. An attack on Southern honor itself? Well, that's what they say. Lost Cause writers increasingly portrayed Sherman not simply as destructive, but as deliberately insulting. His campaigns were framed as assaults on Southern dignity, and most pointedly, on unprotected white womanhood. In that mythology, Sherman became the opposite of the idealized Southern warrior, set deliberately against Robert E. Lee, who was recast as an embodiment of chivalry and restraint.
Okay.
The contrast was very simple, and it was effective. Even it ignored much of historical reality. Wow, you fucking bastards.
Right. In the early 20th century, Sherman's reputation took another turn, this time from abroad.
Oh no, fuck you, Britain. Nobody cares what you idiots have to say.
Influential British military writers such as Garnet Wolseley and J.F.C. Fuller, and especially B.H. Liddell Hart, they studied Sherman closely. They were less interested in Civil War memory than in what Sherman might say about the future of warfare.
Oh, okay.
According to American historian Wesley Moody, these writers often filtered Sherman's campaigns through their own theories of mechanized and modern war. And in doing so, they sometimes exaggerated the scale and intent of Sherman's destruction.
Of course.
Unintentionally, this helped reinforce Lost Cause portrayals of Sherman as morally reckless.
Uh-oh.
That line of thinking reached its peak in the late 20th century, because in 1973, John Walters published Merchant of Terror, portraying Sherman as the architect of a form of warfare that ignored ethical limits and human dignity.
Oh.
A decade later, James Reston Jr., he went even further, arguing that Sherman had planted the intellectual seeds for later programs of civilian deprivation, including American tactics in Vietnam. These interpretations painted Sherman as a forerunner of modern atrocity. Oh, shut up.
Oh, jeez. Some historians, well, they pushed back since then, and they pushed back hard. Scholars such as Brian Holden Reed, he argued that these readings flatten history and confuse intent with consequence. They note that Sherman operated within the legal and moral frameworks of his time, and that his campaigns, however harsh, were aimed at infrastructure and morale rather than civilian slaughter.
Right.
I mean, he could have easily just went and just murdered everybody.
Could have.
Literary critic Edmund Wilson, he offered a different kind of critique. In Sherman's memoirs, Wilson saw a disturbing honesty, an account of warfare that fed on itself, growing harsher as it moved south. Wilson did not accuse Sherman of cruelty for its own sake, but he did not shy away from the moral discomfort the memoirs provoke. That discomfort continued into the modern era. Former Defense Secretary Robert McNamara, he returned repeatedly to Sherman's blunt assertion that war is cruelty and cannot be refined. He cited with both Wilson's Ghost and in the documentary The Fog of War. The statement, well, McNamara, he suggested, remained unresolved. A warning rather than a justification. Comparisons followed. South African historian Herman Guillaume compared Sherman's campaigns to British operations during the Second Boer War, another conflict that targeted civilian infrastructure. He argued that Sherman, harsh as he was, struck a better balance between severity and restraint than British commanders later would.
But he didn't really target even civilian infrastructure. He was targeting things that would keep the South militarily provided.
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
I mean, obviously, you got to burn crops. Can't feed the soldiers.
Wow. Today, Sherman's defenders include a wide range of scholars.
And bang.
Lloyd Lewis, Victor Davis Hanson, John Marsalick, and Holden Reed all see Sherman a commander grappling honesty with the realities of modern war. They didn't celebrate destruction, no, but they used it deliberately to end conflict sooner rather than later. That's what Sherman's goal.
Right.
In the very end, Sherman's reputation has never settled into something simple. To some, he remains a destroyer. To others,
Sherman the Destroyer.
a reluctant modernist who understood earlier than most that war had changed forever.
Mm-hmm.
What remains clear to this very day is that few figures from the Civil War continue to provoke such argument.
And fewer yet still force Americans to confront the uncomfortable question Sherman himself never avoided. What does it actually take to end a war?
It takes...
Long after the armies marched home and the gun smoke cleared, the memory of Sherman took on a physical form in bronze and stone as well.
Okay.
In 1902, the gilded bronze Sherman Memorial by Augustus St. Gaudens rose at Grand Army Plaza near the entrance to Central Park.
Oh.
Sherman is shown astride his horse in Ontario, moving forward with unmistakable momentum, while a winged female figure of victory leads the way.
Fuck yeah.
It's not a quiet statue either. It advances. St. Gaudens later used his original bust of Sherman as the basis for the larger work, which that bust is now housed at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Smaller version of Victory also stands watch at Arlington National Cemetery. Washington obviously honored him as well. In 1903, the General William Tecumseh Sherman Monument by Carl Roll Smith was placed near President's Park. The equestrian statue is surrounded by 4 soldiers representing the infantry, artillery, cavalry, and engineers.
Okay.
The location was chosen deliberately. He was said to have stood on that ground in May of 1865 while reviewing returning Union troops, watching the war pass into history.
Dang.
Other tributes followed, some expected, some strange.
Oh.
Sherman's Circle bears his name. During World War II, we all know that the old British forces named the N4 Sherman tank in his honor,
Look at that.
linking his legacy to a new global conflict.
Yeah, right.
And in California, the massive sequoia, known as General Sherman, still stands, the largest single trunk tree on Earth. A fitting symbol for a man whose presence once reshaped a continent.
Even postal stamps carried his image. Only a handful of generals of the United States Army have ever been honored that way, and fewer still, more than once.
Look at that guy.
The first Sherman stamp issued by the United States Post Office, February 22nd, 1893, just over 2 years after his death. But monuments do not settle arguments. They never do. Sherman remains one of the most...
If anything, they make more arguments.
Right. Well, he's still today one of the most debated figures in American history. To some, he was a man who understood that war could only end when its causes were destroyed. To others, he was a ruthless figure who carried destruction too far. He was both admired and feared, praised and condemned, often for the very same actions. What cannot be denied is this. Sherman saw war without illusion. He stripped it of romance and said out aloud what many preferred to avoid. He said, war's cruel. He said that war demanded terrible choices. And he also said that ending a war quickly might be the only mercy left. His statues moved forward because he always did. Not toward glory, not toward applause, but toward the hard conclusion that peace, real peace, sometimes comes only after everything else has been exhausted. And that is why, more than a century later, William Tecumseh Sherman still stands at the center of the argument, just as he always did. Until he didn't.
Until he didn't. All right, there you guys have it.
Finally, now we get somebody else who wasn't a piece of shit.
Right. Well, in some people's eyes, but I guess some people would call it a piece of shit. But hey, man, you got to do what you got to do and more.
Right.
And he never sugarcoated it. So That's him. We're not going to bog you down. You know, guys, all the things. Survive. Yes. Y'all out there, survive. Make sure you're surviving out there.
Gotta survive, boys.
Also, subscribe while you're surviving.
Yeah, do
and comment, like, share, and all that other good stuff. We'll see you next week for a Confederate who will never live up to William Sherman. That's for sure. So we'll see you then on Battles of the Brickers of War, Behind the Battles, and the Bang.